In a national outpouring of grief, thousands of officers mourned the loss of PC Keith Palmer, the officer killed at the gates of Parliament during an horrific terror attack. Crowds lined the streets to Southwark Cathedral for more than 2 miles to pay their respects to a hero and a young father. We spoke to Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, Steve White, about a funeral that reopened the debate about the need for greater protection of officers.
Should anything change in terms of support for officers and their families as a result of this dreadful incident?
If an attack such as the one that happened in Westminster can happen in the heart of democracy, one has to think, where else could it happen? We used to say it's not if but when. Now we're saying it's not if or when but where next. And we've got to make sure that police officers have absolutely the best equipment, the best resources and the best capability to deal with this level of threat. I think it certainly brought it home to many, many people, the daily risks that police officers see and have to contend with. And I think that there are many things that we need to make sure are in place to ensure that level of protection and that level of resources there for the police officers who volunteer to run towards danger when others run away.
And what kind of changes would you like to see?
Well, there's a number of things. First of all, there needs to be a proper deterrent. Assaults and attack on police officers should carry the full weight of the law. But of course, we need practical applications. We need the resources in place when it's necessary. Police officers on their own without the right equipment is concerning. We need to make sure there are proper risk assessments in place. We need to make sure that tactical options such as taser and the ability of firearms in order to be able to deal with the threats are there and ready and able when they're needed. And we saw that in Westminster, one of the most heavily armed areas in the UK, even there, a determined attacker can actually get through those lines of defences.
Do you think that the fact that Parliament was in the direct line of attack during the Westminster incident, that will have put police forces more front of mind?
I think any high-profile event like what we saw in Westminster is bound to raise the issue of safety and security in the public mind. We've been saying for years that there needs to be a proper debate about what the public expect from their police service and how much they're prepared to spend, because it all costs money. And I think events such as that tragedy in Westminster really does hammer it home, not to the public who, to be honest, don't really need convincing, but certainly in terms of the Westminster Village, shall we say. I think it really did hammer it home, and I think interestingly, politicians are now beginning to think carefully about the implications for the future.
Steve, do you think that society in general, and obviously those who hold the purse strings in Westminster, can do more to protect those who protect us?
Well, I think there's a lot that can be done to change the psyche over what is acceptable in terms of what police officers face. And I think our Protect the Protectors campaign, which is hugely important and is gaining cross-party support, to say actually assaulting a police officer is not acceptable. Because if you've got a society where you're assaulting a police officer, then effectively you're assaulting society itself. There's got to be a level of respect for police officers in order for us to do our job. We police by consent in this country. We need to make sure that the public have our trust and confidence in order to effectively keep them protected on their behalf. But it's no point in having a police service that in itself feels vulnerable and isn't able to perhaps do some of those high-end, more dangerous things because they think that they're going to be at risk. We need to give police officers the trust and confidence that they can go about doing their duties in order to effectively protect the public. I know that's what the public wants. I know it's in fact what the government wants, but we've got to make sure that the resources, the capability and the design of the service provides that.
The use of firearms, obviously that's very contentious, and we do have a special report on that coming up later in the programme. Has there been any progress in terms of the IPCC guidelines?
Well, the IPCC guidelines in terms of any investigation with police officers is still problematic. Of course, the government has to have faith in the IPCC, the public does, but also the police service as a whole. And we see time and time again the length of time that it takes the IPCC to deal with investigations is far too long. And when it comes to dealing with firearms incidents, the message is really quite simple and straightforward. You're either going to deal with an officer as a witness or you're going to deal with an officer as a suspect. There are rules and regulations to cover both of those things. They can't have it both ways. We've seen examples recently of police officers who have been under investigation for 7 years. Of course they've got to be held to account. Of course they have. But 7 years, and that's why police officers are thinking twice about taking the onerous responsibility of carrying a firearm. I was a firearms officer for 6 years, highly rewarding, very professional area of policing, and it's something that I wanted to do. I'd think twice about volunteering to do it now.